So we have our next guest is Maurice Sharp, and Maurice is just recently left Apple, and so he's this is going to be the first time that we get to hear his story about his experience with Newton, because as you probably know, people who are at Apple don't talk about Apple products. So Maurice, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us your story.
Will do. Is it possible to get some control to show a window with some slides in it?
Absolutely, Powell, is that set up already?
Yes, yes, yes. You can just share your screen, share the
Okay,
windows.
wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
It says share screen. Can I share a window? I just want to share one
Yes,
thing.
yes, you
That.
can.
Excellent.
Awesome.
So can everybody see that?
Yes.
In that case, はじめまして。
I can see it.
私は Sharp Morris です。Apple の Sharp Morris です。どうぞよろしく。That's the Japanese version of my card. I spent time with licensees, and I can say more about that later. The Apple No was important because when I was at Sharp, they got confused because my last name was Sharp. That's actually that's the front of the card. I went down to Apple from Calgary, so I got to pick my own title in those days. And Royal Canadian Misplaced Programmers just seemed like the right thing. So what I want to talk to you about is somewhat about the Apple Pie Kitchen that we did in the alpha or beta or perhaps alpha or even beta time, and some other bits and pieces about the flow through Newton. Most of it will be early pieces, and then afterwards there'll be time to ask questions. The title there is based on obviously Newton programming. If you don't know what a DTS is, so developer technical support, this is actually the shirt this is the first developer technical support shirt we did. Pi DTS. I believe we actually wore this at that kitchen. Developer technical support are software engineers, usually ones that have some amount of experience doing software engineering, who help other software engineers that are building applications for some platform. Not only that, but they're software engineers who have a customer-friendly interface. So as you can imagine, they're quite a rare breed. So, and by the way, when people get to know me, they call me Mo, and yes, I'm that Mo. If you've ever seen this video of Mo Demonos, that was my work, and apologies for the very 90s look of it, but that was the time. So in 1992, I got this 4-month summer internship at Apple, and it was, well, ostensibly 4-month. It was at this group called the Advanced Technology Group. And during that time, I got to meet a lot of cool folks, including Larry Tesler. And as that internship was drawing to a close, I really didn't want to go back to Calgary, which is where I'd come down from. My thesis was defended, I was done. And I wanted to work in the Advanced Technology Group. The difficulty was that there were no openings, but it turns out that they originally gave me an internship because I knew things like Smalltalk and Lisp and object-oriented programming and all these really weird things that were from that era, from the 90s, that were new. And Larry Tesler loved Lisp. In fact, he wanted to ship a product from Apple using this thing called Macintosh Common Lisp, something that I knew quite well. So he offered me a second internship, a follow-on from the second, at this group called PI, Personal Interactive Electronics, which of course he was head of. So late in 92, I went over to my second internship to build this tool. This was alpha for the Newton, and it was really odd to develop for Newton. Newton script was fairly new, the whole proto thing. It had moved on from Dylan by the time I got there. Walter had done a lot of his magic. And they were working with some really early developers on this to try and code apps for this. The problem was they had no tool. They had the internal stuff that they used, but that really wasn't a tool that developers could use or even close to what they wanted to release. And so what Larry had me do was build a tool, a graphical user interface tool that allowed you to put prototypes together and drag them around and write code for them. And that's what I did. I created what I didn't create Newton Toolkit, although the tool that I created was used to inform the design of it. But I did get access to people in Newton who were dealing with these alpha developers. At that point, there was only one developer support engineer, somebody by the name of ZZ Zimmerman, or ZZ as I would say, because I'm originally from the UK, who'd been around Apple forever. He was, in fact, they still have a document that they use in Mac, in the Mac DTS group, which is now the Platform DTS group, that was written by ZZ. It's a text document on how to deal with third-party developers and answer questions. And he was really impressed by the tool, especially because there was one morning in this very early kitchen where I went in for feedback. I got feedback on what they wanted to see in the tool. This was about 10 o'clock in the morning. Went away at 2 o'clock. I came in and handed them a new version of the tool with all of the feedback plus new features. To which ZZ said he might actually like to learn to like Lisp. This is somebody who was a C coder. But that got attention. And when that internship was drawing to a close, I still wanted to hang around. Again, no roles in advanced technology group. And so I got some advice from the only people that I really knew down there about what might I do, those people being DTS folks. And they said, hey, why don't you consider working for DTS? Not knowing that the manager of DTS had basically told them to make sure that I joined DTS. And that's what I did. At that point, there was, Newton was going through its alpha beta type of flux. And as we got closer to this time when we might actually ship, one of the things that they wanted was some applications. They wanted to be able to show applications on stage in Boston. And the only way to do that is to have developers in there, teach them how to develop on this really, really new platform. So our contribution from the developer support world and from the training world, a gentleman by the name of Gabriel Acosta Lopez, was to train some developers in what Apple calls a kitchen. We needed a lot of developers trained in order to make sure that there was at least some number of applications there. In general, if you have a kitchen and you put in 10 developers, you will probably get 1 or 2 applications, and we wanted more than that. So what we did, I'm going to swing past this slide. What we did is in the summer of '93, we put on what we called the Newton Soup Kitchens. Soup being the name for how you stored information, kind of like Core Data Today or database. Newton Soup was the database of Newton. And it wasn't just one kitchen. It says kitchens because we took in developers, we trained them for a week. It was about 15 or 20 developers per kitchen. I don't remember what. I'm not sure if any of the veterans are here from those kitchens. We did 6 of those back to back, week after week after week. It was quite an interesting time. This is actually the only award that I have taken with me to every single job that I've ever been in. It's the first thing that gets packed up and the last thing that gets put away. So a kitchen, what do you do? Well, we were very tongue-in-cheek back then, and Apple let us be that way. And so during beta, I say beta V2 because that was the second beta of Newton 1.0. We did this kitchen. What you see there in the center, that Barney picture, was we had a 3-ring binder with all kinds of the training in it. And that was the picture we inserted in the front of all the binders for the developers. Barney was big in those days. And we also made a bunch of different reference cards. So I scanned some of them in. So you had your Newton script reference so people could look that up quickly, the NTK reference for Newton Toolkit, the Proto and View reference, and the debugging reference card, because, debugging happened. And there were a number of other things in there. We had a checkbook example, and there was a reference card for that. And we went through, we showed them how to build this checkbook in Newton script. And during the days, it was sessions. And during the evenings, late into the night, it was hacking. The result of that was applications on stage at launch, some good big name applications, and some ones that nobody'd ever heard of before. Now, the developers themselves, we didn't have a lot of Newton units. And what we needed to do was help them create stuff when they went home. So that's where this beastie came from. This is a new bus card called an armistice card. You probably heard about it or know about it from information in Newton stuff, but it's basically a Newton on a board with a ROM that you could flash with whatever version made sense, because Newton was changing a fair bit even during beta time up to launch. And you can also see on the right there's a PCMCI slot, so you could put in a card, you could try things, you could even develop things like a messaging card. And that was how they work. Of course, at this point, when they were there, they were using devices. This is my own personal device from that period. Notice how on the front, it just says Newton, not message pad. And on the back, it has the original name, which is Newton Notepad. That's what the thing was going to be called. And the developers went away, they did their stuff. And with the early life of Newton before it actually launched, there were a number of times when we talked to the public about what it would be, right? The CES show, etc. And then at WWDC 93, again, before it launched, Worldwide Developers Conference, Apple Worldwide Developers Conference, we did some more information there. And we even handed out this wonderful flyer about Newton Toolkit, the software that, well, it kind of existed because developers were already using it, but trying to build some excitement for developers to come in and start using it. And you have to understand that this was an extremely radical way of programming. To lay out your user experience and to attach information, attach code to that user experience was just not the way you did things. The world was C++. These days, Swift UI is probably the closest to how this looks, or to how the style of programming. The result, of course, was software. And you can see on the left there some of the software that was created. Not all of that was done for 1.0. Some of those are later bits of software. Interesting thing is the Great Meetings software package that you see down at the bottom. The packaging actually has photos of Newton people. That's Joseph Antonelli standing up with the tie, a number of other folks in that picture. The other thing to notice is on a number of those packages, you can see this little logo and the word StarCore. One of the problems of software at that time, and we don't think about it now, but software was distributed in packages and it was distributed on a shelf. So you had to package up your software, and places big retailers didn't deal with onesie twosie developers. or small developers. They might deal with Intuit, but even then they'd prefer to go through publishing houses that produce lots and lots of titles. And their shelf space, right? They had shelf space for Windows and then shelf space for Macintosh. How are you going to get shelf space for Newton? So one of the problems that needed addressing was, how do you get this stuff published? And that's why Newton created StarCore, which was its own publishing brand, its own publishing house. And that's how we got software into the retailers. We did that through StarCore. And that's why you see that StarCore logo on a number of these pieces. As people developed the infrastructure we had for developing, we got more and more stuff. So you can see on that right-hand picture, there's a bunch of different stuff. This is actually a picture sent to me by Bob Ebert, who was a fellow developer support engineer that eventually moved over into engineering in Newton. There's things like the Newton toolkit guides that are there, the programmer's guide, all of those kind of things. There was a lot of material to read through. Again, this is before you had a lot of web-based stuff. You didn't go to developer.apple.com. You bought these big manuals, and you potentially bought these extra books published by Addison Wesley. As it turns out, one of the reasons that those books were published, and the reason that the people knew so much, Neil Rhodes knew so much about the information to publish it, is because he helped construct the training that was used. So that was how a number of ways that we did support for folks. Eventually in '93, we actually had a real developer conference, and this is the fancy handout from that conference. Along that, there's a bag as well. So now we're talking December. Newton has been launched, and we have a conference in the Santa Clara Convention Center to bring people in and talk to them about it and give them this fancy stuff. This is all around Newton 1.0, and you've probably seen this picture. This was a picture that was taken of the Newton team around that time. I'm actually in that picture, as is Gaston Bastiens and a number of other folks, Shane Robeson and a number of other people. It was an amazing time. That's a picture taken in Infinite Loop. The building behind us, I believe, is Infinite Loop 5 or 6. And then we produced more stuff. This was a pad for designing your user experience, etc. And you can see that that's now got MessagePad 2000 as the main piece, as well as the earlier other message pads, the smaller beasties. As time went on, things started to go a little bit downhill for Newton. And this is the Newton 2.0 equivalent of that red picture, of the color picture. You can see there's not quite as many folks there, and some of the folks are different. And there is a famous version of this picture, which I was once the original owner of, and I handed that off when I left the Newton group. I'm not sure who has it now, but we called it the red dot picture because we started tracking who was leaving. As people left, we put the little red dots on, and more red dots and more red dots and more red dots. Those don't necessarily reflect the actual people who left, but that was all part of keeping track of this demise of Newton. And eventually, in 1997, as you all know, Newton was, well, I don't know if it was.
Sorry, could you say that again?
My apologies for that one. Eventually, we tried to spin off Newton, Inc. and out. That's actually my signed acceptance of the transfer to Newton Inc. in June of '97. The badge there, the Newton Inc. I'm in, I was one of the people who was really, really excited about doing this. And so we had a bunch of these badges produced. Oops. There we go. A bunch of these badges produced. And as people would sign, I offered for them to get a badge, and a badge that they could wear around. We even did a version of the badge clip for Newton Inc. And you can see there a sticky that was done with the logos. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it depends on how you think about it, the Newton Inc. didn't fly. Although I believe it was KME was there with money to put into the business, etc. It was funded. It was not something that could go. I don't know all of the reasons why. Probably some of it is simply due to the fact of some of the Apple proprietary technology that was in that device. But that was, alas, the denouement of Newton. By the time I left, Newton was already basically closed. It's just that Steve hadn't officially announced it. One of the interesting things that happened is I went back to Apple in 2014 and got to know a gentleman in IS&T in the IT department who was really into the history of stuff and older Apple products. And he put on a internal show for folks where you had everything from a real Apple I to some of the prototypes of early devices, but he wanted a Newton section. So myself and Suki Lee, another ex-Newton person who was also at Apple, helped put together some things, and he got stuff out of his own collection and put together a section for Newton. And then we had a visitor, and he came into the room and made a beeline straight for the eMate because it was something that he loved. He just came to the station. It was just, oh, eMate, I love eMate. This was one of the greatest things we ever did. And it surprised me because it was the other Steve. So, you never know who likes these kind of things. That's the Think Different is a poster I've got, or a banner I've got. Actually, I've got it behind me somewhere. You can see again some of the software in the background of some of my software, some bits and pieces around there of Newton stuff. One of the things that I do want to comment on, Scully mentioned that without Newton, there really wouldn't be either ARM or iPhone. And what he missed is it's really the case, because both the iPod and the iPhone were pitched to Steve as products by people who were Newton alumni. Not all of them were Newton alumni, but they were key members of the team who were Newton alumni. In fact, the iPhone took 4 tries before he said yes as a product to start working on. Unfortunately, I can't share any of the images I have of prototype iPhones. That would be kind of interesting to show. But Newton had a very large influence on how that stuff was done. The whole user experience on iPhone, the head of user experience was he wasn't the head of user experience at Newton. He was just one of the UI designers at Newton. But it really shows in the products that are there. So with that, do people have questions that I can answer? And can I answer them? And by the way, behind me, you can see that light bulb, and on the other side is a close-up of a T-shirt that was worn by DTS engineers, another T-shirt that we did. One of these days, maybe next year, I could do a talk which is a T-shirt history of Newton, because I have pretty much all the T-shirts that we used internally for all the code names, BIC, et cetera, in boxes behind me and upstairs, or in the attic anyway. So, can I answer any questions? Yeah, go for it, Chris.
Yeah, so my question, thank you very much for taking it. It's a wonderful story. I appreciate you sharing all this. I'm curious to know, from 93 to when it stopped, would you say that Newton was mainly an internal project, or, for instance, we see sometimes some third-party devices from Sharp or from other ones that use the Newton technology. Did you have a lot of input or talks with other companies that were seriously interested in it, or did you always think there was sort of like fringe and not really serious?
So Newton was those are the licensees. Sharp, Kyushumetsu Studenki, KME, which produced Panasonic brands. The licensees were very important because they were part of the way that we made money. We had assumed that those licensee products would sell much larger numbers in their markets, et cetera, and that there was potential tunings of different kinds of devices that we couldn't, that as Apple, we really didn't want to invest in doing. So they weren't toys, they were real things. In fact, one of the roles that I held, and one of the reasons that my business card had Japanese on the back, was working with the licensees to help them figure out how to deal with third-party developers from a technical perspective, from a support perspective, not from a marketing perspective, but to work with third-party licensees. I did a similar thing when I moved on to at Palm after I moved there. So yeah, they were important. What else?
Gotta
Who else can
ask
I?
this.
Matthias, you got your hand up.
It's oh, sorry. Go ahead, Matthias.
Yeah, no problem. I think we have plenty of time. Well, first of all,
yeah.
very, very cool to see all the protos behind you. It's a pleasure. And I think I found Waldo. And also,
Yeah,
I remember from working in the tech part of the film industry that we had T-shirts for everything. I have a T-shirt I have 5 different T-shirts from Titanic and all those crazy times, and it's around the same time, and it's a good reminder of the effort we put into those things back then as pioneers. So I would love to hear more about that.
Oh man, where are they?
I mean, in a separate speech, I guess. I don't want to force you not to pick out the T-shirts, but it is a really interesting story, and it's a nice culture from the tech industry that I didn't know from Germany. So I was very amazed.
Yeah. I mean, we had lots and lots of different T-shirts. There were T-shirts. Generally, there were T-shirts done for any given code name product. So BIC was an example. BIC was a large screen device. And there were also T-shirts done that were tongue-in-cheek. Don Louvre, who was quality assurance for Newton, he ended up doing a T-shirt spoof on Prince for Newton. I got that around somewhere. I don't know if I have a picture of it around anywhere, or anywhere that's accessible. But there were Gelato was another T-shirt, which was, I believe, message pad 110, if I remember correctly. And then, of course, as developer support, we had our own mythology. So Proto Waldo was one of the early things, but somewhat early on, there was an association, and an association between Llama and developer support, like Alama, probably because we were all Python fans, and loved the Llama skit. So there was the expert in stuff for programming for Newton, which is Dr. Lama, which is actually something I started up. I started writing the column. I didn't give all the answers, but I was sort of a gnomon for that, getting answers from Bobby Bird and come on, the names are gone, Mike and all the other folks there in developer support, Kent Sandvik. It was definitely a very eclectic group. I mean, this is a group who, thanks to Mike Engber, originated an order for, get this, 100 pounds of silly putty. Comes in 50-pound blocks, just because he could. And if you've never stood in silly putty, it is the weirdest feeling. And did skits on stage when we had
standing in silly putty again. How does that happen?
Yeah, it was interesting because as I was digging through boxes, I found my 1 pound bag of silly putty, which is still good. You know, that was 1994 or 5, I want to say.
Beautiful.
The other thing I appreciate very much is the licensee model, which kind of helps us a lot with Einstein, because basically what Paul did in the beginning, he's basically, Einstein is pretending to be a licensee, and he has its own ROM extension that connects the emulated hardware with the ROM. So that's a really fantastic approach and very helpful for us.
Eckhart, do you want to? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Maurice.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Maurice.
Yeah,
sorry,
just
Pavel, you have your hand up.
Yes, I wish to ask the question for Patrick, because Patrick's audio is not working very well. He asked, how many Newton notepads are there? I'm not exactly what he mean, but yeah.
I don't know the number of prototype devices that were produced. So I don't know the answer to the question. Others might, but not me.
Okay.
And
I think
so
Eckhart.
yeah, you know, of course
Sorry.
I have to ask this. So Maurice, well, thanks anyway. I really enjoyed reading your articles and your tech support stuff. I really dug through that in the 90s. Really cool stuff. But I have to ask this: do you have any idea if Apple has kept the source code of the Newton OS around somewhere, or is it all gone? And if it's not gone, will it appear somewhere at some point as a Christmas gift?
So as far as I know, the code is all around. In fact, I think for legal reasons, it needs to be around. I don't know that it will ever get released. And if memory serves, and Walter might when Walter's around tomorrow, he might be able to say more than I do, or I can, or confirm. I believe there was proprietary stuff from the Mac in there, which meant that Apple did not want to release that code. And it's, if I understand it correctly, that's also one of the reasons why they put the kibosh on spinning out Newton, was because of the proprietary stuff that was in there that they did not want to get out into the world. So I doubt it'll ever be released, but it's in the archive somewhere.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, and I was anyway quite happy that at least the debug symbols are in the ROM images, so that actually helps a lot. That's pretty cool.
This I mentioned T-shirts and stuff, so this is just a few of the bits and pieces. This was from a gathering, an anniversary gathering of Newton folk that that we had in what we laughingly call Infinite Loop 6, which is basically a bar just in front of the Infinite Loop buildings. And you can see there's the video on the bottom, the Under Siege, where there was actually Newtons used. And there's that Barney kitchen cover as well. If you can kind of see there a shirt that says Eero, which is actually gyro. That's the Newton connection kit. There's also the bottom in the top left. There's the bottom of a Dr. Lama t-shirt. Over on the right in the white is the Starcore one, and I think you can see them better there. So there's a Dr. Lama t-shirt. The one with the Prince looking thing, that was the t-shirt I was telling you about that Don Louvre had done. There's that Starcore logo again. There's a Newton connection kit t-shirt in there. Some more bits and pieces that somebody was even giving away, some things like those Newton envelopes. The famous Egg Freckles cartoon as well. More bits, E-mate pins. I've still got a bunch of these pins around. There's the Boston Macworld pin. I have a few of those around as well. I was there at Boston up on stage. I still have my commemorative black and white photograph of that. The Newton stickers that came along. Right. There's that Newton ink sticky pad that I showed you. We had pens. That was from a platform development conference. I think I still have an extra one of those around. The caps. There's that's the actual Starcore logo close up, the sticker in case you ever wanted to get it. The ubiquitous purple Newton t-shirt. I think I've got 3 of those around still. Those who created software, a Newton solution provider. This one was fun. So we put out Newton, and there was all that problem with handwriting, right? The egg freckles and all those things that came out. So inside Newton, we decided to get rather tongue-in-cheek and poke fun at it by doing a t-shirt. So this was the front, right? Writing Multimedia Corporation Newton Development Team. And the translation, right? Neither 6 coupons, row, silicone, river, or mini trim. Just because, hey, poke fun. Oh, an eWorld shirt. So there's Bic. That was a large form factor device. That was actually the shirt that, that's my version of the shirt that Michael Chow was wearing on stage at that Newton Pi Developer Conference in '93 that I showed you the cover from. Michael's quite an interesting gentleman. I don't know if he's ever talked to you folks, but if you can get him to do so, that'd be wonderful. This actually wasn't Newton per se, but it was when Gil Amelio came in. He wanted to really energize Apple, so he had this massive all hands in Infinite Loop in the middle area, and it was all about the comeback. I was there when the comeback began, which of course it didn't. Power to crush the other kids. So another Newton t-shirt. That's in '96. And then those things. A Newton beta tester. This was for handwriting recognition. Those are the Newton developer CDs. We would do a developer CD every quarter with the information on it, starting with that top one, which you can see already the llama is part of the mythos in there. And the final one, the developer CD 14, had everything on it. That was an interesting find. I haven't even opened it, but it was the thing you handed out if people wanted to show Newton logo things for advertising or whatever it happened to be. There was a mouse pad, even though you didn't need a mouse with Newton. There's the one of the DTS t-shirts. Look for Proto Waldo. That's the picture there, in there is a proto Waldo, if you can find them. Another one, proto Newton developer. So a whole bunch of different things. This is how Dr. Llama, it got really big. So we ended up with this much larger T-shirt, of course, and a Newton connection. Then Motorola did stuff, right? They had the wireless card. And there's Gyro, I sync, therefore I am. Got to have a good catchy name for your projects. And those are the ones I've got on file. Those are some of them. I've got a lot more. Chris, you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks again. So I looked up, the Llama talk always brings up the Ask Llama, the developer magazine question and answer. And I see, of course, your name is on there now. I've looked it up. But so was that I see other names, the people I don't know as much, Todd and Kent. I see Scott's on there as well. So was this really all made up, or would you say that these are legitimate questions that were asked and answered that felt that had a wider, could instruct other people in terms of getting answers?
Those were legitimate questions. We drew them, either people asked them directly of Dr. Llama, or we drew them from questions that we got through developer technical support. We resolved developer incidents. We helped them get their applications working. I remember it could be quite interesting. It was a Friday at about 5:30 in the evening. I got a phone call at my desk. Yes, we had desk phones at that point. A phone call at my desk, and it turned out to be the evangelist in the UK working with the Sunday Times. They were going to have a Newton application that rolled out on Sunday with the edition of the Sunday Times for a contest, and it wasn't working. They couldn't get it to work. So I was on the phone until 3 o'clock the next afternoon, working with them to get that thing going. It wasn't constant. It was, we talked, they tried some stuff, we'd call again. That was quite an interesting thing. Luckily, I lived really close to Apple. So my wife at the time was kind enough to bring me some dinner when people who weren't Apple employees could still get into the buildings. Well, I could still bring them into the buildings, right? These days you can't bring any guests in except for a couple of areas. So it was DTS is great because you never finish an app. You're always debugging, you're always helping, you're always solving problems, and I love that. And to be able to do that and help people is just wonderful. It's a very unusual calling for engineers, but a very rewarding one. I had the pleasure of eventually managing that group at Newton, and then I built the groups at Palm and at eBay and helped PayPal build their developer support group. A very interesting and different thing that most engineers don't know is an option.
Sure. I was just wondering because Conan Bal, which is a similar type of developer magazine thing, that's made up. And so I was just curious to know if these were made up also.
No. Now they might be modified slightly to protect the innocent, or at least the asker. But no, they were all actual questions. Any more questions? Speaking of questions.
I have a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
In the Newton glossary, it says that you're also known as Commander Clueless. Is that true?
That's one I don't remember.
Okay. I was curious if you remembered anything about that.
I guess he's
Basically, I have
clueless
no
about
clue
it.
if that was the case.
It says it's a mystery as to why. So
I'm pretty sure I found that in an old DTS newsletter or something. That's why it's attributed to you. If it's incorrect, I will modify the glossary, obviously.
I'm not, I mean, this, we're talking 1990, 1990s, and that was, that was almost 30 years ago. And age takes away brain cells. So it may or may not, I mean, it could very well be.
I was just curious because Grant here is the keeper of the Newton glossary, so I thought maybe we could fill in that hole, but it's okay.
Hi,
Another
Grant.
question.
Yeah.
Were there any Newton products towards the end that we didn't get to see?
There's one product that isn't a product. So one of the things that happened as the 100 series, right, was coming out, there was the 2000 series, which marketing and product marketing were like, we've got to make these things bigger. And there was this movement in engineering to, no, we've got to make these things smaller. In fact, if you go through Defying Gravity, you can see there the comments that Steve Capps made about, can we get a small thing like this after having seen a Palm Pilot? There have always been rumors, and I can neither confirm nor deny these. This is something you'd have to ask. Well, actually, you can't ask the hardware gentleman because unfortunately he passed away. But there are rumors that he bought a Palm Pilot, ripped out the guts, and built a Newton inside.
That's cool.
I'd love to know if there really was such a beastie and if it still exists. But yeah, unfortunately, Mike Colbert is no longer with us. Although his brother and sister are still around, whether they would know, I believe I asked Daniel Colbert once, and he said he didn't know. But not know, just he didn't know. It wouldn't surprise me. One of the surprising things was that the eMate and how big a hit that was. Thank you, Johnny I, for the design. So Jonathan, sorry. There's, you talk about alternate histories and what could have been. When eMate got delayed, and so it missed the education selling season, but we went out after the education selling season. The lass who was running education marketing, who's still at Apple, by the way, she's a wonderful person. I was talking with her one day, and the education markets were like, we want this. We want lots and lots and lots of this. When, I'd love to put in orders, but it's too late because all my orders are already in. Next season, if we'd have made the education selling season on eMate, the story might have been very, very different because the demand was there. Significant demand was there. Now, by the next selling season, would it have been there? Who knows? Because I don't even remember what kind of products were around at that point. But the eMate was squarely designed and aimed right at that education market, unlike the Newton devices, which had a much broader range. So that was unfortunate that it wasn't out earlier. As to other products, there was a larger and big. There was a big beastie, but that was early on. That was junior and there was junior and senior. Junior becoming the MessagePad 100. Senior never really made it. It eventually transformed into the 2000. But BIC was a bigger thing that never made it into market. And it's not just Newton devices that were that were prototypes. Somewhere around, I've got prototypes of different cases, of a really fancy leather case, bigger leather case for the device, and all kinds of other things. One of the things about Apple is that they really take design seriously, and they will do a lot of prototyping, and not just for the device itself. but for all the stuff that goes around it. I mean, they really go deep in thinking. You know, when I went back to Apple in 2014, one of the people that I got to know was somebody in the group who solves manufacturing problems about 3 to 5 years ahead of time of the product actually going on a manufacturing line. So for example, if you think about the iMac, the big square one, right?
The classic.
Right. Well, no, not the gooseneck one, but
Oh, sorry.
the iMac as it is today.
The
right?
iconic design that we know best because it's been around for so long.
Right. But that one, eventually, they started out with a case that was that had a certain thickness, and then they made the case thinner. And if you think about the front of an iMac, there's the top, and then there's a plate at the bottom, and you don't see any seams because of the way that the aluminum is welded.
It's unibody.
Right. But at that point, with the newer, thinner case, they couldn't do the weld with existing technology. It would show a bump along the bottom. So her problem was to figure out, how do you make that weld in this new design? And like I said, that was done about 3 to 5 years before the product rolled off the assembly lines. And it turned out to be a very high-speed rotating wheel of some type that used heat and friction to do the weld. But this is the kind of depth that Apple goes into on everything. Newton was no different. The prototypes and the thinking on that there was lots. What else can I answer?
Who else has a question?
What other crazy things did they have to invent so they could get a product on the thing, like similar to the Mac welding?
Say that again. What was the?
What other crazy things do they have to do, like similar to what they for fixing stuff, like what they did the Mac welding?
I don't know a lot about that. This was just
All
one
right.
conversation. This was just a conversation we had about that particular thing, and now she couldn't tell me even if she wanted to. She's still there. But it is the kind of thinking that they need to do to build the kind of products that they do with the look that they do. Everything from the mixing of the metals to placement to wiring, everything there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's an amazing number of people that are behind any given product that's out there.
Great. This is the last call for questions, but I just want to say that, Maurice, that was a really fun presentation, and I think everybody really enjoyed it. And we hope to be hearing more from you in the future.
Yeah, well, I'm around, and as long as I either stay at Okta or retire.
Thank you.
Although I moved to North Carolina to leave the Valley, to leave the fast pace behind and the cost of living behind. It turns out that about 2 exits up the freeway is where both Apple and Google are building their campuses in the Raleigh-Durham area. So, maybe it's time to buy a house up there so I can sell it in about 3 years when the prices get incredibly inflated. But
thank you for the tip.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous area. I mean, we looked around the whole country to figure out where we wanted to go, and this is just it's been really nice here. Thank you, COVID, for the excuse to make the move.
Thank you very much, Maurice. Thank you very much for that stories. Really, really nice. Really great stories. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Paul, are we going to take maybe a 4 or 5 minute break?
Yes, because the next presentation is at 19 hours.
At the top of the hour?
Yeah.
And it's
so we
going
have
to be
like
Matthias.
yes. So we have like a 2 minutes. So guys, short break, like a 2 minutes if someone need that. And we waiting for next presentation. Yeah.
Great.
Somebody had asked in the chat, do you recall whether StarCore later published Macintosh software? StarCore was set up for Newton software. and it went away when Newton went away. If it did Macintosh software, it was Newton related.
Okay. Great.
That armistice card was really cool looking, by the way.
It unfortunately, it's not actually the one I have. When we moved from North Carolina from Cupertino to North Carolina, I had movers come in and pack up the house. So that's why I don't actually have that blasted light bulb thing, because it's packed up in a box somewhere, as is the armistice card. But at the moment I don't have a new bus Mac to use it. The only old Mac the only old Macs I've got are the 17-inch UFO type back there somewhere, and the 6100 that I used to get this make that Modeminos movie and render it. Oh my gosh, that was slow. A 6100 with a 16-inch color monitor. CRT.
Wow.
That's upstairs in the attic somewhere.
Man, so that card basically ran Newton OS 1, or could it do higher than that?
Oh no, so that card was a 1.0 Newton. That was all the hardware of a Newton message pad on a card. The only difference,
okay,
right, but the only difference is that the ROM was writable. So you would get this ROM package as a developer, and you would flash the ROM on the card. You would do your development and send it down to the card, and it would bring up a window on your Mac that was a Newton, where you could run your software and try it out. And then because these were the developers who were creating stuff for the launch, and for products that weren't yet launched, where we couldn't distribute actual devices, they, as the ROMs got updated, they would flash the new ROM and try their products again to make sure that they were working. Grant, you should demo those. Yeah.
Oh, now yes. I want to make a Newton powered car.
Okay. Yeah. So and that was, that was something that we distributed developers. Internally, we had other things. We had these big mucking. We had everything from big mucking cases, boards with all the electronics between it and a screen sitting on top that were quite large, to this. I can't remember the size of it. There was a black cased one about this big with the Newton sort of on it, with all the hardware broken out inside the device for development. All kinds of stuff in order to get this stuff going.
Kind of like an early eMate, just much bigger.
Not an eMate, just big breakout. The same thing happens now at Apple for hardware. If people are working on a new version of iPhone, what they're likely to get is a big black box that they can't open with a screen on top. No idea what the size is or anything like that. It's just a black box. In fact, you'll only get the kind of stuff that you need to see for whatever it is you're doing. You may never see, in fact, you won't see the whole thing together. There's very few people who see everything before a product ships. And that's right. And that's not just hardware, that's software. So for example, Swift, the language Swift, at the point that was announced at WWDC, there were 400 people in the company who knew about it, and that's it. Right? There were very, very few people. I was part of developer publications. We were documenting Swift, and I knew nothing about it. Only 2 people in developer publications knew about it, people who were developing it. So Apple's really, really good at keeping stuff secret, even inside, and making sure that you just see what you need to see.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing that earlier. That was really interesting. Actually, it all was.
I just want to say that Walter just joined to us. So maybe there's a way to, because you mentioned about Walter earlier, maybe there is a chance to, verify
I was
the
afraid that would
information
happen.
here.
He's with you tomorrow, right?
Yeah, all right, okay.
Yeah.
Hello, Maurice.
He's also here now if you want to say hi.
Oh, hi, Walter.
Hello.
Wow, long time no see.
Indeed. I'm trying to calculate how long, and I have no idea.
It's okay. I'm just setting you up, and saying things about you, but don't worry about it.
That's okay. I'm sure they're all either true or interesting, or both.
You could probably say the same things about me, so don't worry. I was saying some things about Newton that I couldn't quite remember on some of the engineering and some of the development stuff, and said, hey, the person that Walter might be able to say more because you were part of the development team, whereas I was just DTS, so we didn't see all the bits and pieces. One of the things was there was a question about the source code and whether that could, whether it still exists, and B, whether it could ever be, put into the public domain or distributed. And for me, if memory serves, yes, I believe it still exists, but I believe it can't be distributed. And I thought it was because there was some proprietary stuff in there from Macintosh things, but I don't remember. You might know better than I about the.
I'm sure it exists in storage container somewhere, but all those, well, like take the Lisa for example. The Lisa source code was supposed to be released, and that was announced, I don't even remember, like 3 years ago or something, and it hasn't been. So any of these releases are very tricky because somebody has to actually go through and answer questions like what you just asked. Like, does this contain something that Apple licensed from somebody else? Does it contain something that's for some reason, I mean, I can't imagine what this would be for Newton because it's 25 years old, but something that shouldn't be released. And the problem is not necessarily even that's true. The problem is somebody has to actually go through it and see whether that's true.
Mm-hmm. And
the priority obviously is not going to be real high compared to iOS 15.3. So it kind of depends on the amount of energy you can generate within the company for getting people to actually go do that. And as I think we can see from what's happening, I don't know what's happening, but whatever is happening to the Lisa source code, you can have a lot of momentum and then have it sort of mysteriously what's happening to it. So it is possible, and I'm sure it exists, but it's not always straightforward or easy as one might think, because it's like I always think, well, who would care about that? But it is a legal process that you have to go through. That it's not an engineering problem. It's more of a corporate legal sign-off problem, and it takes a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see the Lisa source code, for example, because I'm sure that that's got some really fascinating early stuff in it, and people don't really think about the Lisa that much, but it was pretty amazing when it came out.
Great
so I think just from an
calculators.
educational, just academic perspective, it would be interesting to see how that thing worked, and that's why the Computer History Museum pushed to get it out. So I think the same would apply to the Newton code, but that's my current example.
I will have maybe stupid question. I'm very late Newton user because I joined the community after the project was shut down. And I'm not familiar with a lot of, details related with this. I know basic stories, etc. So I have a question to Walter and to Maurice also. Would be maybe different question. Do you think that would make a sense if we as a Newton users community write kind of let's say official petition to Apple and ask Apple officially about releasing the code of Newton OS or whatever? I'm not very familiar with legal stuff, etc. Yeah. So sorry for my ignorance, but my point is like, would be possible, and if do you think it's a make a sense to write to Apple and ask them for that kind of, release the code or something like this for future development, like for our community, obviously not for the commercial purposes, yeah, but like, for example, give us at least those of who wants to develop and want to try to improve a little in the system, give a better chance and better, better less work, let's say, and do this in a very, let's say, more legal way than we do now. What do you think about this? Is it a good idea or not?
I mean, you could do it. I don't know that it would make much difference. I don't know that it would. Yeah, what you need is the way to get that stuff released is to have an internal champion in Apple who wants to help get it released.
Right.
There is maybe one or two people I can think of that might go for that. But it's going to be a lot of work to get that kind of stuff done. As Walter said, there's both engineering and legal investment in getting that code released, and it's non-trivial. I mean, I don't even know how many lines of source code there are in that for the OS, but it's not. Somebody's got to go through it. I mean, every line, looking for all the includes, all of that kind of stuff. And then if there are things that are licensed and included, those would have to be removed, so that you then have to go talk to those people. It can be quite a challenge.
And I think you have to consider, like when you're getting anything done, you have to consider the incentives that people have, right? So I think a petition from this group, much as I love this entire group, is not really going to change anybody's incentives. But somebody like the Computer History Museum, I think is both very engaged with this exact problem. Like, how do I get companies to release? Because they've done this several times with various platforms. How do I get companies to release source code? They've kind of worked through a lot of these practical issues. So I think they're really of anybody I can think of, they're in the best position to make the high level contacts and to kind of make the argument and be able to kind of work around the practicalities of it. And that's why I kind of used Lisa code as the example, because that's exactly what they're trying to do. And you should be able to use that same method for the Newton code if they can figure out how to do that. But clearly they're still working through that. So there's no magic wand there, but I think they are already on what I would think is the best approach. Anything that would work.
Mr. Tao, don't you have contacts at the Computer History Museum?
I know a few people. I'm a member as well. Something I can certainly look into, but no. And Noah, you did a presentation there too, right?
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
we can tag team on that.
That's a great idea. I have not, I know one or two of the people that I originally talked to there have left, but I think that if we start building a relationship over time, then maybe that would be a good strategy. So.
And I've actually brought this up when we did the showing of Noah's film. I talked to some people there, so it's not going to be it's not like it's a new idea. So, but it requires. I mean, Maurice is exactly right. It requires champions internally and externally who are actually going to spend time pushing it, and that's really the key to getting it done. So, just from my discussions that I had with the folks at the museum, that they would love it. I think it's really more a matter of finding the internal Apple contact, and I know there's been some turnover in Apple legal. So the people I think who worked on the Lisa agreement I don't even think are there anymore. So it kind of adds a level of kind of education and commitment. But it's not they're still around. But they don't work for Apple anymore. So
And Robin Goldstein retired. She was Apple legal during the Newton stuff and did stuff for us. But there are actually still some engineers at Apple who have gone back to Apple that were part of the Newton team. Jeremy, who is a later addition to the Newton team and one of the people who pitched iPhone, is left and then is back at Apple. And a few others are there. Mike Engber, unfortunately, has retired. He retired several years ago. Now, if you want an interesting speaker, by the way, Mike has some wonderful stories.
That's true.
He's the gentleman who got the silly putty.
And he's what, like 70% of the Easter eggs are in there.
Yeah. Yeah. He was originally in Newton DTS, and then he moved over to engineering.
So, gentlemen, next year, before the next year conference, I definitely contact you and ask you for the names because I wish to invite more people like you on our conference, because listening your stories is really great pleasure, and this is awesome. Thank you so much for that. Yeah,
you're welcome. And he's a good story. I left my email in the chat. There were a few people who asked questions like,
thank you.
If I have extra pins and stuff. I have to dig through and find them. Some of them are in boxes that I found, and some of them aren't.
I just want to read. All right. I just want to read the comment that Lou left on the chat because I think it's really nice comment after your presentation, Maurice. Thanks, Maurice, to you and all the great DTS folks. You really made all of us developers feel like part of the family. Yes, this is really nice. Yeah.
And that was our goal. Although I have to say that the reason that the person behind all of that was Gabriel. Steve Strong was the original manager, but Gabriel Acosta took over first as manager of DTS and then as director of developer relations at Newton. And his groups are always amazing. He eventually ended up doing the same thing at Palm, which is where I went to after Newton. But yeah, thank you.